and they were the organization that planned the Civil War 24 years before it started. The sign is very the sign is very similar to the lion's paw, and the reason it might be is because there were members of the Knights who were also members of the Masons. This is a photograph of Jesse James, the famous outlaw, on the left, and his brother Frank James on the right. Notice that Frank is giving the lion's paw sign because he was a member of the Masons. The sign being given by Jesse is, I believe, the sign of the Knights of the Golden Circle because it is known that Jesse was a member. By the way, Jesse James later became a 33rd degree Mason. This small photograph is of Alan Pinkerton, the head of the Pinkerton Detective Agency. He was giving a sign that shows that he was a member of the Masonic Lodge. Mr. Pinkerton was hired to capture Jesse and Frank James, but he never accomplished that goal, and I think the reason he didn't is because he knew that Jesse and Frank were Masons, and Masons take an oath to protect their brothers. This is Bloody Bill Anderson, a lieutenant in Quantrell's Raiders during the Civil War. He's giving a sign showing that he was a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle. This man led murders into attacking individuals and families during the Civil War. It has been claimed that Jesse James rode with him during that time. And I would suggest that this is where Jesse learned about the Knights of the Golden Circle. He must have learned about the Masons from his brother Frank, who was already a member by the time of the Civil War. This is Salmon P. Chase, the Secretary of the Treasury in President Lincoln's cabinet and a member of the Masons. He is the individual after whom the Chase Manhattan Banks are named. Many believe that the Chase Manhattan Banks are owned in Maine by the Rockefeller family, and they have been supporters of the Illuminati conspiracy for generations. I have two more to show you, and they are real eye-openers. So get ready, because I believe that you will find these two pictures to be very disturbing. This is the February 17, 1986 cover of Time magazine, and as you can see, it shows a picture of the television evangelist Pat Robertson clearly giving the lion's paw sign on his chest. I want you to particularly notice the grin on Mr. Robertson's face. It appears to be the smile of someone who knows a secret and knows that he cannot tell us. And now we know what that secret is. If Pat knew what this sign meant, he is a Luciferian, not a Christian. And the reason he is grinning could be that he knows what he is doing and that we do not know. And on the chance that you find that a little harsh, ask yourself why he was photographed giving this particular sign. Let us presume for a moment that he was asked by the photographer to assume this particular pose and didn't know what the sign meant. How many photographs in the world do you think show someone giving this particular pose? I have been looking for pictures of this sign for probably 20 years, and I have found but maybe 25 of them. One would presume that Mr. Robertson would have asked the photographer why he wanted him to stand this way. It is further presumed that most people being asked to pose this way would not do so, simply because they did not understand what it represented. It certainly isn't a normal way to stand, whether for a photograph or not. So what was the reason that Pat agreed to stand this way? I do not know, except I suspect that it was his way of telling those in the world who saw the photograph and knew what the sign meant that he was one of them, a Luciferian. It might be remembered that Pat was running for the presidency of the United States in 1986, and this was his way of informing others that he was under their control because he was one of them. This is the only thing that makes sense. A Christian minister, Dr. David Weber, who ran the Southwest Radio Church, was a fellow member of a group of Christians who broadcast radio and television programs on America's airwaves. He reported on his radio program that he took this Time magazine cover Pat giving the sign and asked him directly why he was photographed that way. And according to Dr. Weber, Pat responded, "I fell off my horse and injured my arm." If you believe that, I will sell you my shares in the Brooklyn Bridge. And the final photograph is not a photograph, but a portrait of President George Washington. I must admit that it is a portrait and not a photograph, because there were no cameras when Washington lived, so no one can certify that he posed for this portrait. But that statement begs the question. Because this is an official portrait of Washington released by the George Washington Masonic National Memorial Association. This is their building in Washington, D.C. So even if Washington did not pose for this portrait, why would the Masons release it as an official portrait of him? The only explanation that makes sense is that the Masons are using the portrait to inform those who are born again to Lucifer that George Washington was as well. Now I'd like to get back to our study of America's secret destiny. The Masons, the Order of the Quest, and the Illuminati were directly involved in a belief in an ancient mystery religion. Albert Pike wrote on page 624 of his book entitled Morals and Dogma, "Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, and that is true. The ancient mystery religion is 6,000 years old and is found on every continent, in every culture, and in every religion." So now back to the issue. 23 of the 39 signers of the Constitution were members of the Masonic Lodge, and many, according to Manly P. Hall, were members of the Order of the Quest. Ben Franklin, a Mason and involved in the Order of the Quest, admitted that they used words to deceive. The symbols of the Great Seal of the United States that they designed are concealing hidden truths from the American people, and these were the men who formed the government of the United States. Now let me show you a way you can tell who designed the Great Seal of the United States. This is once again the front side of the seal showing the eagle. Notice that above the head of the eagle is a 6-pointed star made out of 13 5-pointed stars. This is a close-up of that symbol. This 6-pointed star is, of course, the Star of David, a symbol of the Jewish faith, but it is also a Masonic symbol. But the Masons are not a Jewish organization. They are non-denominational in that they allow each member to believe in whatever God he chooses to believe in. And I shall discuss that a little later in this series. And here is some of the evidence that it is a Masonic symbol. This is a photograph of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Freemasons in Maryland. And this is a close-up of the building to the right. And you will see 4 of the 8 or 9 6-pointed stars on the top of the building. But the Masons use the symbol as a sign of the Masons, and in all of my research I have never seen an explanation as to why it is one of their symbols. So I can only give you my opinion. The reason seems to be that they do so because of the hidden number 13 in the star itself. This is a drawing of the 6-pointed star, and it has, of course, 6 outer points. And this 6-pointed star illustrates the fact that there are a total of 7 shapes in the star, 6 triangles, and the 6-sided hexagon. Obviously, 6 plus 7 totals 13. I have drawn in the 6 lines to make up the 6-pointed star, and you will notice that it is made up of 2 triangles, one pointed down and one pointed up. Now we're going to transport these lines from the eagle side to the pyramid side of the Great Seal. And this is a slide showing you how it looks when you put the 6-pointed star down on the pyramid. Now notice that the triangle with the eye in it points to a blank space between the 2 words annuit and sceptus. But the other 5 points point to 5 letters. A at 10 o'clock, S at 2 o'clock, N at 8 o'clock, the second O in ordo at 6 o'clock, and M at 4 o'clock. These 6 letters, or 5 letters rather, are together A-S-N-O-M. There is a word in a dictionary that describes the scrambling of letters in a word to conceal the actual word. And that word is anagram. A-S-N-O-M is an anagram for M-A-S-O-N, the Masons. So it is clear, the Masons are the men who designed the Great Seal. The Masons hide things in plain sight. We all carry these dollars, and only a few in America know the secrets they contain. Now let me show you how the Masons legally grab more power in the Constitution than any dictator or tyrant in history. For years, the American people have been told that the American form of government, a constitutional republic, is the finest form ever devised by men, and that the American Constitution is the finest document ever written by the mind of man. And I used to believe that as well, until I discovered the fact that the Founding Fathers literally placed a phrase in our Constitution that they knew would later destroy the nation. Because as thousands of today's patriots have discovered when they have gone to the courts of America to argue the constitutionality of various laws and regulations, they've learned that the Constitution of the United States of America is null and void. There are no constitutional rights in the courts of the United States today. And the reason that is so is because this nation's founding fathers set it up so that our God-given unalienable rights would no longer be rights, but would be privileges granted by government. And the reason they did that was because they were members of the Masons, the Illuminati, or the Order of the Quest, or any combination of these groups. To prove that the Constitution is null and void in America today, we must go back to the year of 1776, when the Founding Fathers declared this nation's independence from Great Britain. The Declaration of Independence was just that. This nation was declaring its independence from the government of Great Britain. Those who wrote it were complaining about the tyranny being imposed upon the American people by King George, the King of England. And the proof of that is found in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We, the people, wrote, "The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations." The word usurpation is defined as the illegal seizure of sovereign power. The American people were reclaiming their sovereignty by declaring their own independence from the tyranny of the king. The word sovereignty is defined by a dictionary as being supreme in power. The word sovereign is defined as being unlimited by any other meaning any other person or government. The Declaration continues, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To understand what that means, it becomes important to define the word tyranny. Webster's 1828